Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So today we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of sonata form, and we are going to use a Mozart tune, his K545 Sonata, number 16 in C major, as our experimental guinea pig for this whole process. So this video is like kind of part analysis, part learning a new concept. His 16th sonata is super popular. I'd be really surprised if you haven't heard it before, honestly. It's one of the first sonatas that a student will learn when they're, once they've graduated past the easier sonatinas. So this would be, if you wanted to learn this song, this isn't a tutorial or anything, but I'll leave the sheet music linked in the website, in the blog post. It would be about a grade 8 level. So it's not super easy. It's like pretty solidly late intermediate level. Anyway, let's get started. There are a ton of piano sonatas out there. They make up a big part of what we learn how to play on the piano, everything from like classical music mainly, but also lots of romantic music, and even some modern pieces are sonatas too. But the term to some of us is kind of like a blank, vague, fuzzy term as opposed to like something that you hear and go like, I specifically know what a sonata is. So that's the first thing I want to talk about is what is a sonata? There are two answers to this. So first of all, a sonata is a multi-movement work for a solo instrument. So you can have like piano sonatas, cello sonatas, flute sonatas, and so forth. So at least one of the movements in a sonata is in something that we call sonata form, which brings us to number 2. There's sonata form. So this is different from the sonata as a genre categorization because it refers to just a specific structure for a piece. And this structure includes an exposition, a development, and a recapitulation. So let's look at these two answers in more detail. When we say something like Sonata number 16 in C major by Mozart, we're referring to a type or genre of song. Sonatas have 3 to 4 movements, and basically what that means is that a sonata is made up of a few different mini songs. Think of it like an album. Like a regular pop album has around 10 songs, runs about 30 minutes long, and that adds up to about 3 minutes per song. Whereas a sonata runs anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes and has 3 to 4 pieces, with each of those pieces being somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes usually. Mozart's 16th sonata, the K545 sonata, has 3 movements: an allegro movement, andante, and rondo. Usually movement names are just based on like whatever speed that movement is played at. So we're going to be focusing on the allegro movement today because that movement is written in sonata form, and that brings us to number 2. So when we're talking about a sonata as a song structure, I want to start by making another pop music comparison. So pop music generally has a structure that looks something like this. You got a verse, chorus, verse 2, chorus, bridge, and then another final chorus. Obviously, it's super basic, but you get the idea. So in pop music, the chorus is the main idea of the song, and it's usually the part that repeats the most, and it usually has the same lyrics too. Whereas the verses are usually softer with different lyrics, but the tune is pretty similar from verse to verse. And then the bridge is the part of the song that's completely different from all the other parts, and it usually serves as like a big build up to like a loud final chorus. So I'm not gonna lie, sonata structure is obviously very different from pop structure, but I feel like understanding sonata's structure makes more sense once you understand that popular music is generally based on pre-existing structures. It worked the same way in the 1700s and 1800s too. So like sonata form was like the pop form of back in the day. So sonata form has 3 parts. It's got an exposition, development, and recapitulation. Say those 5 times fast. We'll talk about these more in depth as we analyze the Mozart sonata, but the exposition is basically like where the main ideas are. It's kind of like the chorus a little bit. The development takes those main ideas and kind of like twists them around and manipulates them. It goes a little wild. And then the recapitulation returns to the stuff from the exposition. It's kind of like a big repeat with some minor changes. So like we just mentioned, the exposition is where the main idea of the piece is heard. It's kind of, again, like the chorus in pop music. It's that part that's going to get repeated a whole bunch as well as twisted up and around later on in the song in the development. But it's also not quite so simple as that. A basic sonata exposition generally includes not just one theme, but 2 themes. It's kind of like 2 different parts. And those themes are divided by a transition part between the 2. Kind of like, you can think of it like a verse in pop music. And the themes are then capped off by a codetta, which is just like a little mini ending, and that just kind of wraps up the exposition nicely. And in sonatas, once you've finished all 4 of those different parts, you go back and you repeat the whole thing. Let's take a listen to the first theme of Mozart's sonata. This theme is written in the home key, which you might be able to already notice by the key signature, but it's in C major. It's a really short theme, it's just 4 bars. The transition basically serves as a link between the first theme and the second theme. The second theme is almost always going to be in a different key in a sonata, usually in the dominant key or the 5th note from the original starting key. So in this case, our original starting key is C, and then if you walk 5 notes away from C, you land on a G. Then you'll notice the end of this transition part, we're actually ending on a G chord. So Mozart accomplishes this transition from the key of C to the key of G by taking us on this long tour through many different scales and many different chords until we wind up in G. Basically just a little bit of modulation magic there. So now we're at our second theme in G major. Just like the first theme, the tune here, it's catchy and it's simple. There are some similarities to the first theme as well besides that, like you got the fast-moving left-hand patterns and stuff going on here too. The second part of the second theme, like over here, you can start to see the notes are changing. We move into, they're basically arpeggios, kind of like how the first theme had scale fragments, now we got arpeggio fragments. There's just another reason to practice your scales and arpeggios. From there, we do a little brief tour in the key of A minor, which is a natural relative to our original key of C major, and then we finally wind up on a G chord. And then we arrive at our codetta or mini ending. It's just 3 bars long and it just serves the purpose of really solidifying the key that we move to, which is G major. So it ends on a strong, perfect cadence over here. And that kind of makes it sound to the ear like we've reached the end of a paragraph, not just the end of a sentence. So then when we move on to repeat the entire exposition again, the return is immediately noticeable because you're like warping from the key of G all the way back to key of C. So it sounds pretty abrupt. And Mozart, like other sonata composers, they're really not trying to trick us with this repeat and make us not notice that it's repeating. They're supposed to be super obvious and apparent. That leads us to the sonata development. The purpose of the second part of this sonata form, the development, is really to take our 2 themes and mix them up and make them all crazy. In developments, you'll see lots of key changing, you'll see different rhythms, sometimes entirely new parts too. In developments, they can sometimes get pretty dark and uneasy. That's kind of the whole point of them. There's usually a lot of tension and oftentimes they're pretty dramatic. So let's take a look at this Mozart sonata and see what he does with the development. So the first thing Mozart does here is take the tune from our codetta, which is like this little ditty right here, and he makes it minor. This is interspersed with some scale fragments over here, which is kind of like the transition of the exposition. Ooh, I rhymed there. Transition of the exposition. So then we're just wandering through a few different minor keys in this part, like G minor, D minor, A minor, and this leaves us this feeling like we're floating, like we're not anchored in any one key. And beyond that, the keys he's touring us through are all minor keys, which makes us feel obviously more uneasy than major keys. And then we are at the final part, the recapitulation. Now, generally, the recapitulation, isn't that just a fun word to say, recapitulation? I'm sorry. Anyway, basically, it's the same thing as the exposition, but with a couple alterations and modifications. First of all, instead of the first and second themes being in different keys, like, you know how in the exposition we went to the key of C for theme 1, and then we went to the key of G for theme 2. In recapitulations, we generally keep them the same key, so like C and C. Except Mozart broke the rules here because, you know, that's what he did. So instead of his theme 1 being in the key of C like it, you know, would ordinarily be, he decided, no, you know what, we're gonna do this in the key of F. This time our transition is a little bit longer because it has to move us from the key of F back to our home key of C for the second theme. You'll notice there's a completely different part, like right in here, that we didn't hear the first time, just kind of thrown in there. But then when we get down here, this is exactly, you know, the same set of notes that we had in the first transition. So that serves as a link to our theme 2. Our second theme is identical to the one in the exposition, with the only difference, of course, being that now we're in the key of C instead of the key of G like we were at the beginning of the song. The codetta is also identical and also in the key of C. And we end this recapitulation on a very solidifying perfect cadence. Then, what you would have to do once you get there is go back and repeat the whole development and recapitulation part again. And that concludes today's video part, information part, analysis of a Mozart sonata. I hope you enjoyed this. As always, you can leave requests or any ideas you have for future videos in the little discussion area below, and I always read them, so I appreciate when you take the time to send a comment. Thank you so much for watching, and oh, one more thing before I go. Wait, don't leave yet. I started a Facebook page. It's called pianoTV. Bet you couldn't guess that one. If you haven't joined me over on the Facebook page, please do. I use Facebook. I'm one of those. So I feel like I'm on there a lot more than some other things. So I don't know, just let's go have a good time on Facebook. Anyway, I'm finally done now. So have a good day, and I'll catch you next time. It's gotta be you. I'm listening to Backstreet Boys right now.